Good morning. Happy Saturday. If I can be completely honest, these last few days, spending time, my personal time with God, spending my quiet time with Him, spending time in prayer, I've been, I don't want to say battling or struggling, but it's been more so of, and let me say this, it's not that He didn't prepare me for this, but my tussle with the Lord or my petition with the Lord was, Lord, I don't understand how those that you have promised as far as pertaining to other people's promises or their kingdom marriage or for marriage restoration, how so many are giving up and throwing in the towel right now. And he had to remind me, he said, Synovia, I had you release a message, I believe it was on New Year's Day this year. It's when I had on my Grinch pajama set when I came on here on New Year's Day, and was basically saying, he said marriage, it was going to be like a sickness, like COVID. And I remember talking about in the message that the same way COVID affected everyone, some people were infected by COVID, some did not make it, and some did. And he said it would be like that with marriages. So what I'm trying to say is that many would be affected of how the enemy was trying to come in and attack just even the thought and belief that God could restore it, that God was going to allow you to meet them, that God could do what God told you He would do. And I guess because I want everybody to win, I want everybody to see the manifestations and promises of God, because I know what I had to endure. I know how long that wait was, how long that stand was, but God was faithful. God still is faithful. God will always be faithful. And I guess I expected those, especially those that, that I've been pouring into, and I'm not talking about like my calls, but just in general. Y'all, when I say so many are throwing in the towel, and the Lord had to let me know, He was like, Synovia, I told you everybody wouldn't survive this. Everybody wouldn't. It's easier. Thank you, Holy Spirit. It's easier for many to believe that God can't do it. It's easier to believe that God won't do it. It's easier to believe that God just has something else for them. So the fact to believe, to want, to desire, to hope, that was too hard for many. That has been too hard for many. And God remind me even of the five foolish virgins. It was 10 of them. 5 were prepared and stayed prepared and waited, and the other 5 didn't. And I guess I'm just having a hard time because I know how many times I wanted to quit. I know how many times I wanted to throw in the towel. I know how many times I went back and forth with God. Are you sure you're going to do this? You said you were going to do this, but this is happening, that is happening. So I know what it's like to waver. I know what it's like to be tossed to and fro, but I don't know what it's like to quit. I don't know what it's like to give up. That has never been my mindset. And I'm not calling anybody out, but it's more so I know what it takes to stand and believe in God for something that looks absolutely impossible. And especially when you're in that place, the enemy uses that as an opportune time to come and send other false vessels that God did not send, to speak certain things that seems like maybe that's my story. Maybe that's going to be my outcome. Maybe since people say it happened like this for them, maybe that's going to be, my outcome as well. And you have to hold on for dear life. I've talked about this before. You got to have stubborn faith and be stubborn with your promise. Like, I'm selfish with this. I refuse to allow the enemy to take this from me. It's not even a fact of being tossed to and fro, because I think all of us will always be like that when it's something we have to believe. But when it comes to Holy Spirit was just saying, just for many, it's just easier to believe that either not even that God can't do it or God won't do it. It's easier for many to believe that maybe God didn't even say this. So we start coming up with this conclusion of, maybe I made all of this up. Maybe this isn't for me. Maybe God. And when we start going down that rabbit hole, that's exactly what we do. We then get ourselves further and further away from the promises of God. And, I've mentioned before, like, Holy Spirit resides in us, right? So he's not leaving you, but when you're speaking and thinking things that is not in alignment with what the Lord said, Holy Spirit shrinks back because He's like, I cannot come into agreement with your thoughts and what you're speaking right now. So that's when we start feeling blah. And many of us, thank you, Holy Spirit. I've been talking to a lot of my clients this past week about this. When we move in assumption, that's how many of us get out of the will of God, how we get out of alignment with God. Because it's like, I've been waiting for God. I've been asking God, and he's been silent. So we're thinking, since he's been silent, he must not be in this. Since he's silent, he must be telling me this isn't for me. Since he's silent, he must be telling me to go ahead and leave or to go ahead and throw in the towel. Our assumptions, I've said this before, like part of my prayer, Lord, save me from myself. Help me to get out of my own way. But when you have that itching ear and that tickled ear, your ear needs to be tickled like you're reaching for words. And when the enemy sees that, he's going to send his vessels and his agents and his minions to speak the very things that are contrary to what God has told you. I was even asking God, Lord, how is it, about this raising up another? Like, God, that isn't even your character. And he told me, he said, I told you before. I was going to allow a time where there was going to be division, where you would clearly see who was sent by God and who was speaking on God's behalf and who wasn't. And that's happening now. God is not fickle. God is not schizophrenic. God is not bipolar, where he says one thing and then switches up and says another. Like, although nothing is impossible with God, this is why it's so important. Thank you, Holy Spirit, for you to know the Lord yourself. Period. Not only do you need to know his voice, you need to know his heart, his character. And the only way any of you guys are going to be able to know that is to spend time with him. I only hear from God because I make time for God. I spend time with God. I was okay with being pulled away from everything to spend time with God. And I'm not saying this to validate myself, but I'm saying this to let you guys know the same way he speaks to me or any other man or woman of God is the very same way he will speak to you. When you begin to understand God's heart and his character, there will be things that people speak or do, and you'll be like, although they're saying God did this, God will do this, this is what God is doing, you know that goes against his character. So you won't be able to, thank you, Holy Spirit, receive what they're saying. You won't be able to come into agreement with what they're saying. Because let me put it like this, certain things that are said, I know I don't know everything. I will never say I know everything. So part of me is like, Lord, I know nothing is impossible with you. I know you're always doing a new thing. So maybe some of what they're saying, I don't know, maybe you're doing it like that for them. But something in me could not receive and come into agreement with a lot of those messages, at least from beginning to end. So Holy Spirit then challenged me with it. Like, well, think about my character. Think about my heart. Think about what you know about me. Thank you, Holy Spirit. So even with that being said, all those different messages, y'all, if you don't know the Lord for yourself, if you don't know his voice, if you don't know his heart, his intentions, his character, you will easily be deceived and manipulated, where many are right now. Many are being confused right now, but the Lord is allowing this because he's going to come in and intervene and interject and come and disrupt things. And there will be no question of who God sent, who was speaking on behalf of God and who wasn't. God is allowing this confusion right now because, like I said, as I stated earlier, he already knew many weren't going to survive this wait. Many weren't going to survive this stand. Many were going to quit. Many were going to go their free will, and going in their free will, then start saying, well, God did this and God did that. No, we got to hold ourselves accountable. Either say, I messed up. I thought it was God. I got deceived. I went in his permissive will. I apologize. But that's a whole nother message. Thank you, Holy Spirit. I'm not even going to get into that. All I'm saying, you guys, is you have to stay at the Lord's feet. All of this being tossed to and fro, all of these confusing messages, God is not the author of confusion, but God will use it. So if you're receiving this and receiving this and receiving this, and you're not taking it back to God, God, what do you say? Sometimes you don't even have to take it right back to him. Like, no, that's not his character. That's not his heart. That's not how he carries himself. That's not my God. But you won't know this if you don't come into relationship with the Lord for yourself. So I just want to encourage you guys really to be mindful, guard your gates, guard your ear gates, guard your eye gates. Who has your ear? Pay attention to when Holy Spirit is saying to you like something with that isn't sitting right. Stop grabbing everything that everyone is saying. Say, God sent me this. God told me this. God showed me this. Because a lot of them, many of them, God did not send. God did not show them anything. God did not tell them anything. But this is the time God is allowing that to, again, draw that fine line of who is and who isn't.